Hi, everyone. Welcome back to Metaphysical Egypt. I'm Allan Peoples again with Patricia Lehman. On the screen, we have the famous Dendera light bulbs, which may not be light bulbs after all. I think you're going to get into that, right?
We absolutely are. They're light bulbs if you want them to be light bulbs, but there's so much more. Hi, Alan.
Hi, Patricia. Let's get into it.
Let's do it. So we started yesterday by talking about creation from out of the void, from none, nothing. And they describe this. Many, if not most of the ancient cultures describe this as out of chaos comes order, out of the primordial waters of chaos, order emerges as creation. And I love this quote by Robert Lawler. The golden ratio is a reminder of the relatedness of the created world to the perfection of its source and its potential future of evolution. And we've been talking about that, how the patterning itself tells the story of not only our creation, but every step, all of the cycles along that way, giving us a roadmap basically for the past, the present, and the future. Atum, we've talked about Atum as the original creator god in the Heliopolitan myth. He was a self-engendered god, meaning he created everything of and by himself, the source of everything that exists in our perception of the world. The creation of myth of Heliopolis described the process by which he evolved from a single being into individuated aspects of himself. And it's great because I just saw this post by Laird Scranton yesterday on social media, and it just fits to be placed right here in our presentation. He speaks, he's done a great deal of study about the Dogon from Mali, in their cosmology. And I can't recommend the work of Laird Scranton highly enough. It's absolutely incredible. And he speaks about many of the similar things that I speak about in a lot of my presentations. So I wanted to include this because it relates to what I was talking about yesterday and what we'll talk about today. So he wrote that Griol and Dieterlen write in the Pale Fox that Amma was the original creator as a feminine force of nature, had designed the universe before creating it. The material for the design was water, with which he traced the figures in space. And we have that watery waveform again. And in this case, I'm talking about Source as a great and grand architect. And he goes on to say, this is from Laird, by virtually every reasonable measure, the Dogon mythological character Amma is the anthropomorphization of magnetism. Here we go, magnetism. Amma's actions in the Dogon creation myths illustrate what magnetism does and how it does it. Any reasonably scientifically minded person should recognize this. You know, and this is what I say about the Egyptian cosmology. The electromagnetism is at the heart of what everything that we've been talking about, even since the first presentation. And it's the foundational patterning of our breath of life. So he goes on to say, if we need an assist to that realization, the Dogon word Amma itself literally means to grasp, hold firm, or establish what a magnet does. Given that, there's no sense whatsoever in thinking that the Dogon tradition endorses a god in the modern sense who literally designed the universe before creating it. What's being conveyed is that the patterns for energy in the universe are most directly observable in water, watery waveform, and that they rest on magnetism, all quite reasonably true from scientific perspectives. So it's myth basically emulating what science is already telling us on so many, and what science is even more recently discovering. Is something that the ancients knew, which again speaks to that higher level of consciousness, finding a way to portray what they knew to be true at a deep level into a symbolism that we could understand at a later time.
Mm-hmm.
And I think this is what's happening now in this moment where we're moving into a greater awakening on the planet.
I can't help but notice that Ama being a palindrome, you have Am and Ma, so it's like magnetism and then the reverse of magnetism. So you have the two polarities represented in the same name, positive and
Exactly.
negative.
I love that about, and even mom is a palindrome, but Amma is even better. I just like that it's like it's like the Akhet in a way where you've got the forces coming together to create dual opposing waveform.
Hmm.
It's two tones moving away from each other and coming back to each other. The beginning is the end, as I said. Um, it's
And what we
and I
experience now is the magnetic field in between the two.
Exactly. Exactly. I know. It's incredible. And I always think of the movie Alive, and I don't want to talk about that too much now, but or what was it called? Arrival. Sorry, not Alive.
Arrival,
Arrival.
yes.
Where they speak about Hannah. The protagonist's daughter's name is Hannah, and it's a palindrome, and it's so important to the understanding of the depth of what they're telling us about our language itself. Um, but again, maybe we'll do a whole presentation on that because it's truly profound. So
I think we
yeah,
should.
yeah, I think we should because that movie really, I've seen it now probably 6 times now, and I'd be happy to sit down and watch it again. So yes, this great architect creates the universe in a form of electromagnetic patterning. Wow, liquid light becoming form. So I found this again, through my research online, and it's based on the work of Walter Russell. Again, one of my heroes. What we're looking at is the table of elements, right? The periodic spiraling of elements. I never really felt or understood that, they all spiral out from H, the center, H being the first element. And then all the elements spiral out in the Fibonacci spiral. My gosh, it's incredible, even to that level. And it's all based on magnetism, electromagnetism. As it was
Yeah.
explained, are electromagnetic and can be measured by the pressure of their life force. And this is how they spin out from center. And remember, we said H was the center that divides heaven and earth
Hmm.
as the
Right.
double square hydrogen. And that atom is the hydrogen atom. So
The
here we
single
have
point from which all things come.
exactly. So really incredible, mind blowing. And here's another quote from Guy Murphy. The Fibonacci sequence turns out to be the key to understanding how nature designs and is part of the same ubiquitous music of the spheres that builds harmony into atoms, right? Molecules, crystals, shells, suns, galaxies, and makes the universe sing. Wow.
Mhm.
Beautiful. From chaos to order, from none to one. Again, here's that symbol of atom as the serpent, and it's just beautiful. The serpent sine wave, right? And that's it's Nun in the left hand bottom left hand corner, but on the right is a symbol of Ha'api. The Ha'api is the fertility of the Nile. So on a smaller scale, we see images of him. He is said to basically be responsible for the floods that happen, the annual floods, and the floods that come with every great year. Ha'api is also our symbol for Aquarius. Wow, what does that mean? We're going to talk about that as well, because with every beginning is an end, and does it come with this great flood of primordial waters? Atum ascended from chaos waters with the appearance of a snake, the animal renewing itself every morning, from the Book of the Dead. Cosmic Serpent. And here we go again. We mentioned Atum and Adam are the atom, right? Our atom. And the serpent plays a significant role in both stories, one being biblical and one being the ancient Egyptian story.
I have to mention also, Adam is a word that means man, at least in the Turkish language, but I think in some other languages as well.
Yes, yes, I've heard that before. So yeah, yeah.
Just interesting.
It is interesting. So here we go again. Atum, atom, atum. Ah, I haven't said that yet. It's a tomb, right? It's a container. And we've talked about being in this night cycle where we are entombed in flesh. And that flesh, from this perspective, is the magnetic field, right? That forms around anything that's living and breathing. We are all atum, entombed, encased, right?
Right, like we said a
Um,
few episodes ago, everything has a magnetic field.
exactly. Well, not everything, but most things that spin and breathe have a magnetic field. Obviously, we do. We have several Taurus fields within, around our chakras. And they talk about this great uh, Taurus field around our hearts. The HeartMath Institute speaks about this quite a bit, and it's stretching out and interacting with everybody else's toroid, Taurus toroid fields. And so we're all connecting with each other and through, how we're feeling in any given moment. So that's huge. If we're always feeling down, we're projecting that to the universe. If we're feeling up and happy and appreciative, we're projecting something positive.
Right, your
To
energy imprint going out is fractal. So if you're in a negative mood, you're eternally in a negative mood until you decide to change that fractal pattern.
Well, yeah, because it's not only that, the law of attraction brings what you project back to you. So I like that you said that. Incredibly
Mm.
significant and important, that what we project is what will come back to us, often in spades. So food for thought. Um, so he was also called, Atum was also called Lord to the limits of the sky. And the completed one. And I think it's interesting because Atum, Tum is actually still used in Arabic today as tamam, relates all the way back
Mm.
to this Egyptian word, and it's fullness and completion.
You think
And we
so?
find, yeah, we
Tamam.
find yeah, we find that many Arabic words can be traced back to origins in ancient Egyptian, which is,
This is how
we
you say
tend
okay or fine when somebody says
exactly
something to
when
you. So
somebody asks how you're doing or whatever, you can say tamam, cool, good. Um,
tamam, atum.
well, and that's why Nefertum is also an atom of sorts. I call him the harmony of the atom as opposed to the disharmony of the atom. But at any rate, so Atum is also called Tum, Tem, Temu, and Atum. And again, original seed as H, as the hydrogen atom. Atum is said to have created himself from the primordial waters of chaos or Nun. We've said this before. And he creates Shu and Tefnut from his saliva. So, and then they create and so on and so forth. But what's interesting is some of the essential characteristics of the Taurus flow process. As I'm relating to the two, listen to what I'm saying. It is centered by a still point, right? We said Atum is the point. He's the point of singularity, right? He has a central vertical axis of rotation. Both receives and emits energy simultaneously, is self-sustaining and made from the medium in which it exists. So we're basically describing both the atom and the torus field and Atum. So quite fascinating. And who knew that, in ancient mythology is speaking to our very own creation? Well, of course. And so this all occurs to create this original serpent sine wave, right? This wave that not only is that first breath of foundational waveform that creates form, but it's also that which defines space and time. So once that first ejaculation occurs, we have a measure for time and space. Wow. And the ups and downs of this waveform create our patterns for positive and negative and day and night. So this is one becoming two, basically. And then beginning this process of cycles of birth, life, death, and renewal over and over and over again. And this quote is from the New Kingdom book of the Heavenly Cow, which is a fantastic book, or Destruction of Mankind, which explains the rhythm of day and night. And it says, "I will cause that you encircle the two skies with your beauty and your light. That is how the moon of Thoth, or Jehudi, comes into being. Consciousness itself." So consciousness is part of that Taurus field that we've been talking about. And remember I said, hue, everything, sound is creation. Well, hue is the sound, and it's always coupled with sa, which is perception. And sound is the waveform, and perception is, and sa is the perception within the waveform. So it all happens at once. Consciousness and our physical, the foundation of our physical form, is all created at the same time. And I also like to point out that, when you look in the heavens, we see the sun is emitting all this, all this light, right? But we look up and we see darkness in the heavens. And how do we know that the sun is emitting all this light? It's from the reflection on us, and the reflection on the moon gives us our light at night. So it's interesting, we talked about us being the reflection of what's happening in the space in between. Just like to point those things out from time to time. And so this night cycle of Amen, and we talked about this in one of the earlier presentations, the 5 cycles of the sun being Keper, the Great Awakening into a day cycle, and Ra, the stubborn, and Un being our highest state of consciousness, the stillness, the silence. And then we fall into Aten, which is our highest state of living consciousness. And then our night cycle is Amun. The night cycle is when we see the birth of form from Nut as the face of Hathor. And Hathor is the womb through which we enter the heavens through the wormhole of the birth canal that is the stargate to our journey on earth as physical beings. And we showed you this image of Hathor and Nut, the face of Hathor and Nut yesterday. And I pointed out the scarab as the seed of consciousness, or I should say in the last presentation. And I didn't point out, if you look to the right of the sun being born from the womb of Nut, you actually see this bark with a lotus flower, and it's emitting this sine wave serpent, right? And that serpent, spirit, if you will, is being dropped into the face of form at birth. Right? So the seed of consciousness and the sine wave patterning, the spirit, are both being dropped into the face of form, which, if you see, I have a structure encircled underneath the chin of Hathor's face. That is, if you look closely, you'll see it's the pillars of Boaz and Joachim. One has very dark blue and almost black squares, and the other side has white and gray squares. And it's the dual opposing. It's the positive and negative, as basically as the symbol of pi, right? It's the gateway. It's the portal through which we are born. As the pi symbol, which I'm going to point out in a few minutes, is also the symbol for Gemini. So all quite fascinating. So yeah, this serpent. We are, and when I say that about the pillars of Boaz and Joachim, it's showing that we're born into duality. We do not exist in a physical perception of reality without positive and negative, and they're both us. We can't just embrace one or the other. We must embrace both sides of ourselves, and then learn how to transmute that which does not serve us. Mm-hmm. And here we go again, this patterning in the crypt. On the image I have all the way on the far left, we see that same serpent, and it's down in the crypt that one of the first crypts that was opened. They just recently opened several more crypts, underground crypts, underneath the first floor of the temple of Hathor at Dendera. And it's a beautiful serpent sine wave coming out of the lotus bark, right? And it's, you know, you can relate that to what we see on the ceiling upstairs in the first Hepastal hall that we walk into. And then you have this image, we've shown you the image of Brahma being born from the lotus. And here's a beautiful image where his arms form the sine wave pattern, right? And the serpent sine wave. And the Bhagavad Gita says, from the unmanifested, all the manifest things spring forth on the arrival of the day of Brahma, as basically this serpent sine wave, right? And I'm not just doing this for fun, because that same serpent that's born from the lotus is expressed on this image that we see bouncing all over social media. And we're being told that it's a light bulb, and the people that are proposing this are giving very good explanations for why they say it's a light bulb. But my feeling is it can be a formula in some ways. It can be a blueprint, if you will, for a modern technology. But we've already pointed out that the ancients had this deep connection to nature, and they didn't have explosive technologies. They had technologies that were in sync with nature. So I personally don't see this as a light bulb, because I absolutely know that it is portraying the birth of the cosmos. This is the birth of the sun, S-O-N-S-U-N, the seed of Horus, if you will, into the container of this lotus bulb, right? Because we, again, are contained. We are enfleshed when we are in physical form. And how do I know it's a birth? Well, several different aspects. First of all, I'm going to point out that the figure standing on the far right is a frog. He has a frog's face. And what do we think of when we think about frogs? But, you know, the prolific, you know, all the tadpoles that they give birth to, right? So the frog in ancient Egypt and many other cultures was always related to pregnancy. There's even a frog nettert, a female, that is related to childbirth and pregnancy. And in this case, he is like a genie that is protecting the birthing process, and his name is Upu, right? So he's there protecting this, and he's holding two knives. And there is an ancient creation myth that speaks to the birth of the cosmos from a lotus in the Sea of Two Knives, the primordial Sea of Two Knives. So here you have this illustrated in front of us. And then in front of him, you see this birthing box, if you will. And the netter that's on top of it is the netter called Hay. We've mentioned him before, representing eternity, right? Infinite cycles. He's basically here to suggest that this is an eternal cycle, over and over and over again. Life, we give birth to life, we have sustained life, and then we have death, only to be reborn again over and over and over again. And next to this, you have the backbone of, or in front of Hay, you have the backbone, which is the jet pillar, holding up the currency, right? In the Ka position, the life force, right?
With the arms up.
Exactly. And then in front of the jet pillar, we have a pregnant Hathor. She's in the pregnancy position. So we know that she is giving birth to this first waveform that becomes the liquid light foundation of our physical perception. And then in front of, actually behind her, you see these two images. They're both said to be Horus. And they have their hands together like the two charges, right, coming together.
Mm-hmm.
And then, of course, if you look, the stem of the lotus is coming out of the birthing box up into the bulb. and then giving birth to this first breath. And we already talked about this process, the lotus being representative of the earth, water, air, and fire. And that first breath is the fiery liquid light waveform, right? So we have our four elements all here at the birth of the cosmos. Pretty cool.
Much cooler than just a light bulb, I think.
Well, this is what blows my mind, because people hate it when I tell them this story, some people. And I think it's so profound. Oh my gosh, look at everything contained within this symbolism. And I think it's just absolutely mind-blowing, but then that's me. So, you know, I keep talking about the birthing box, and I want to point out, if you look at the image in the upper right-hand corner, this is a black square. But what's fascinating about this square is they, you know, when I first came to Egypt in 2005, the entire ceiling in that first Tepestral hall was blackened. It was darkened. It was covered in soot, right? And at one time, the sands were quite high in the temple. And I think the soot may have come from people sitting within the temple, the sacred space, and burning fires.
Mm-hmm.
But the whole ceiling was black and darkened. And when I came back again, not the next year, but several years later, they had, in 2008 already, they had half of the ceiling cleaned. And then within a year or two, they had cleaned the entire ceiling. But what's fascinating is they left this square as the only place in the entire ceiling that they didn't clean. Or is it really black? You know, we have to think maybe it really was a black square.
Maybe they didn't clean it and it's black underneath.
And as a birthing box. Now, where it's placed is incredibly important. And I'm going to speak about that in a future presentation, because it speaks to something that's mind-blowing and profound. But the figure you see within this black box is a figure called Nehebkau. And Nehebkau is responsible for placing the Ba and the Ka into the physical form at birth. He also has a part to play at death. So he is sort of like an end. He's there at the end, but he's there at the beginning. And my feeling is that Nehebkau could even be the serpent, right? That is the spirit that is placed in the body that I showed you just 2 slides ago, right? Doesn't that make sense? Because he has a serpent head. That is Nehebkau. He is the serpent. So he is this fertility, the Ba and Ka, right? Our soul and our physical life force being placed into form, which was the pillars of Boaz and Joachim, right? At birth. Wow. And, you know, I put the other image underneath because the symbol of this Merkaba, and you're only seeing it in 2D, has a black box within it, if you can imagine it in 3 dimensions. There is a relationship with Saturn. We're going to talk about all of this later, but it also is a way of showing how waveform becomes form, the sacred geometrical patterning of life. So, yeah, there's no mistake. And when I talk about the birthing box, you know, it's to me, it's one of the most profound symbols in Egypt. So, yeah. And here we go. There's that tomb. And we're seeing the mathematics of the egg and the serpent, that first breath, container created by the movement of liquid light from the cosmic egg. And underneath that, you see an image that we see repeated in different places in Egypt. And it's an image of the sun, that's Ra Harakti, sitting on a bark, and he's going across the path of this serpent sine wave. And he's basically going across the earth. You see on the boat in front of him is Set. And Set is, he's actually attempting to keep the serpent at bay or kill the serpent. And what happens when we kill the serpent? That's flatlining, right? That's going back to that moment of silence because of that waveform, right?
Sorry, I'm just thinking of all the hospital shows we've seen where the monitor goes beep,
I know.
beep, beep, and then flatline.
Yeah, well, even the movie called Flatliners or something was there a movie? It was anyway, it was
That's so true. I mean, our heartbeat, our energetic signature coming
exactly.
out of our body is in the form of a sine wave. That's our life
Exactly.
force.
It is our life force. Um, so Walter Russell said, "In the wave lies the secret of creation," and everybody should have probably heard Nikola Tesla's quote: "If you want to find the secrets of the universe, think in terms of energy, frequency, and vibration." Our entire biological system, the brain, the earth itself, work on the same frequencies. Fractal patterning of life. And I think we've shown you this over and over and over again. um,
As
and
above, so below.
exactly, exactly. And here's the path of the sun on the ecliptic. And what does it look like?
A sine wave, of course.
Of course. I think what's fascinating too is the little image on the right shows the sun rising for the first time, maybe on the planet, you know. But when the sun rises on a new day, it happens off the shores of Australia. And off the shore, on the shoreline there, when the first land that sees the sun every day is a place where you see Mount Morning. And I think it's fascinating. I just said every day, but I was told when I was in Australia that on every spring equinox in March, well, no, for them, it's not in March, it's in September.
September it would be, yeah.
Yeah, that Mount Morning gets hit by lightning, which I found fascinating because that's a yearly cycle, you know, what happens on the great year. But anyway, I think that's all fascinating. And Henry Miller, the playwright, wrote Souls enter the material bodily form upon Earth's plane at the Tropic of Capricorn and exit at the Tropic of Cancer. And we're going to talk about these tropics a lot in the future as well, because why are they even named Capricorn and Cancer? Important things. But it's the top and the bottom of this waveform of the path of the sun on the ecliptic. Really, really amazing. So, and look at this, fertilization. Egg as a womb within a womb, if you will. Again, fractal patterning of life. This is what's happening within us. And remember, I said the female womb was held high, highest, most sacred in ancient Egypt. And again, you see that beautiful serpent pattern, which will be fertilizing. The sperm fertilizes the egg inside the uterus. And here we go. So many have likened the face of Hathor and her hair to the human female uterus. There are no accidents. Patterning of life. I just wanted to place this here because we spoke about the serpents, you know, the cosmic serpent and the alchemy of the Sphinx and the cosmic serpent. But here's this beautiful sundial, and it's showing, you know, they're keeping time, right? They're watching, keeping time between the two lions, which brings so many ideas to mind. But I also found this quite interesting. I read an article where they spoke about, by David Rooney, called Monument of Timekeepers, where they spoke about the first sundials and how it really disturbed the peace. And he's speaking about in Rome here, but, you know, designed to regulate and control are the myriad of daily activities of the Roman citizens. Well, even us today, we wear our watches and we live by our watches, and we've forgotten how to just, you know, it has so much control over our lives. That's where we're at in this moment in time. But they quickly became uneasy at the intrusion of this new timekeeping technology. And he says one exasperated playwright made a character exclaim, "The gods damn that man who first discovered the hours, and yes, who first set up a sundial here, who smashed the day into bits for poor me." You know, when I was a boy, my stomach was the only sundial, by far the best and truest compared to all of these. It used to warn me to eat whenever, except when there was nothing. But now what there is there to eat isn't eaten until the sun says so. In fact, towns so stuffed with sundials that most people crawl along shriveled up with hunger. I think it's funny and fascinating how much a timepiece can change our lives. But
Well, it's just like we lament, everybody's staring at their cell phones nowadays. Nobody's even looking where they're walking.
so much more control over our lives. And we're all still asking, where is Horus? And on so many levels, what does that mean? During a day, during a year, and during a great year, where the heck is Horus? So here we have another image on the other side. If you go down into the crypt, if you've been down into the crypt, the image I just showed you was on one wall. And if you turn around, you see this image. And here we see the dual opposing wave spin, right? And what's interesting here is the jet pillar is now at 23.5 degrees. So, and the Horus figures are now back to back. So they're creating, right, the splitting of the atom, if you will, or where there was one, we now have two. And I found this from a text from the Ptolemaic period, and it says, the great Lotus come forth from the great pool, which inaugurated the light in the first time, Septepi. You behold its light, you breathe its perfume, your nostrils are filled with it. It is your son who produced himself as an infant, illuminating the land with his two eyes. Opening his two eyes, he illumined the two lands, separating night from day. Truly beautiful. And of course, they say the eye of Ra splits into the sun and the moon, the eyes of Horus, right? So fascinating. So when people speak about the light bulbs in the temples, especially at Dendera, they often put up this picture that I have on the left side of what looked like two light bulbs, right? And what I'm here to tell you is what you're actually looking at is the body of Nut bent over. And that image of the serpent inside is the path or the birth of the sun current. The breath of the life force of Ra is what you're actually seeing. And you can see the image on the right, in the middle basically, is Nut bent over. And underneath you see, it's sort of like an image of Shu with his arms up, but it's creating the birthing box in a beautiful, beautiful way. So the Shu and Tefnut are the electromagnetism of the birthing box, right? And you and I just saw this at the Met. It's from a sarcophagus called, from the sarcophagus of Weritschnefer. But it speaks about the cycles within cycles within cycles of this birthing process. And of course, I have the image of the light bulb, and yeah, it can be a formula for a light bulb in a very obscure way. But yeah.
Maybe they were giving us the formula for an even better light bulb.
Maybe they were. Not going to place any money on that. But they say the appearance of a bubble surrounding the serpent represents the protective enclosure of the sky, the environment in which the sun is born. It's associated with the womb or placenta of Nut, who swallows the sun each night and gives birth to the sun each morning. And it refers to, and I love this, the primordial birth sanctuary of the sun. Makes sense to me. And so we see the Kepler beetle on the image on the right, and it's in the container that is formed by the Sine Wave serpent, right? And it's very similar to the dance of Shiva, what's surrounding the dance of Shiva, all meaning something similar. you know, that we eternally migrate through cycles and cycles within cycles of consciousness, death, birth, and rebirth. It is the cosmic dance of Shiva, as well as the alchemical journey of Kepler, the Egyptian scarab that pushes the sun, soul or self, across the Milky Way of this hologram. Really beautiful. And then one becomes two. Mitosis, cell division. We see the Vesica Pisces separating, right? Together, creating, again, it's a womb, right? We see the two eyes of Horus representing the sun and the moon. This is the division. This is when the one becomes the two. You see in the lower left-hand corner is the image of the netter. It's a hieroglyph that we say today, many people say today, means God. But again, remember that the ancient gods were forces of nature. And so the netter hieroglyph is shaped like an axe. Some say a flag. The axe makes more sense to me because the vital function of an axe is not to cut, but to split something in two. Mm-hmm. Just like splitting a log of wood, you'd swing the axe aiming at the point in the middle, atum, right? And splitting it in two. And this is creation, and that creative force of nature would be God, the creator, right?
Just like a cell divides in two right after fertilization, before it divides into four.
Exactly. As soon as this happens, opposite principles control the life of the physical universe. Everything in creation falls under the laws of duality. Pairs of opposites or polarities symbolized by male and female. Hence, the male and female Neteru. As Hakim said, they were 360, 180 feminine, 180 masculine, creating that perfect circle. Cycle of life.
In their stories, you know, they always have, you know, brother and sister or husband and wife, but really they're just the male and female aspects of the same principle.
Exactly, forces of nature. And I saw this absolutely incredible image when we were in India together, Allan. And it's, you know, the image, he looks like Bess to me, right? Mm-hmm, which we say is that center.
Absolutely.
Right? And
that
you see
scary
this,
face with the tongue coming out, which is the...
Exactly. And you see this great breath of life breathing out into duality. And underneath, you know, within this breath, you see images of the sun and the moon. Just incredible. I love this. So the Garden of Eden is a metaphor. There's what Allan was calling the Sine Wave. And I agree wholeheartedly.
We're born into sin.
We are born into sin, into
original
the Sine Wave, container that holds us hostage. Adam is the atom, and like Atum, the point of singularity that generates from sound as the word of God. It explains how we fall into matter, where one becomes two, duality, along with self-recognition. This is that moment. This is the fall, when we realize, when we recognize who we are, as opposed to being connected to everything, we have self-identity. And the knowledge of good and evil, right? That's what we're told, the polarities that exist in a physical world. Sin actually means the lack of knowledge or wisdom to understand the nature of this reality, right? So the veil is dropped, and the veil being that sine wave patterning that is the Taurus field, right? We're born into the veil. And so we are now, we've fallen into sin, right? That lack of knowing. So to judge things as good or evil demonstrates the inability to recognize that they are one and the same, or two sides of the same coin. The sin or sine wave, as the basis of everything we perceive, takes us on a journey from one side to the other, rhythmically creating the illusion of time and space. The ups and downs, the roller coaster ride. It's falling from perfection, ma'at, when we were in that, you know, had that wonderful, beautiful time of peace, into this roller coaster ride where, all bets are off, and we keep falling into a further state of separation consciousness. Until now, is my opinion. So Eve's apple, what was Eve's apple? And of course, they say some ancient texts said it was a pomegranate, or other fruits, but it does become the apple. And if you see the apple, it is in a sense a womb. It is a Taurus field. They say that, the evil, right? The evil Eve, evil, Eve-veil. Wait a minute, veil. Eve being energy veiled or entombed. Evil is the opposite of live. So Eve, the feminine, is not evil. It is, I think, more to do with the veil. The feminine is the electromagnet. It's the magnetism. It's that waveform. It is the electromagnetic field that surrounds us. That is the veil that we're born into. And it's funny that apple in Latin means malice, which means evil. Interesting. So Eve ate that apple. What was she thinking? But as I'm going to point out, that veil, the magnetic field that surrounds us, was in ancient Egypt the wings of Isis and her sister Nebhet. And I've mentioned this before, but it might make more sense now. And you see these three wonderful images where they hold their wings around Osiris, who again is the land as Earth, right? He's us as human beings, and we are born into the veil. The embrace of the wings of the divine feminine is the veil that protects us and yet keeps us hidden. Keeps us hidden from our divine truths. So, yeah, the veil of forgetfulness. As above, so below. What appears as a single dot or a circle in the acts of creation will emerge as two distinct and highly active powers. Just what we've been talking about. And I've shown this imagery before. I just like to show it again. And here's the Akhet, the horizon of my own logo. It's the Aker expressing duality, if you will. It's the two lions, as I mentioned before, were named Dwaj and Sefer, yesterday and tomorrow. Interesting, right? So when they're together, there's just the point of singularity, but as they divide, and here we have a feminine and a masculine, lion, two lions, one feminine, one masculine, and they represent the portal where the sun rises on the horizon, the birth of the sun. Really incredible. So what happens when yesterday meets tomorrow? The end of time, and we pointed that out before. So when yesterday meets tomorrow, we have the eternal now, and it's always now. The movement is the illusion. And Atum relates from the Book of the Dead. Atum relates that at the end of time, he will destroy everything he has created, and that the world will return to the primeval situation from before creation and become an inert mass of water.
This is your breath back in.
It's the breath back in again. Over and over and over again. Well, cool.
Every time we reach the screen, I'm like secretly disappointed.
I know. And wait, there's more. There's part 3. So yeah, we'll get to part 3 soon and wrap up the creation, the breath of creation. Because obviously it moves into 4 and then 7 and then
Amazing, incredible stuff.
Yeah.
Thank you, everybody, for joining us again. Please like, share, and subscribe, and tune in very soon for more episodes. Thank you, Patricia.
Thanks, Alan. See you again soon.
Talk to you soon.